right, Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee, we're back for ordinance 24-0521, ordinance of estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2025. Eric Costello, councilman from the 11th district, chair of the committee. Joining my left, Odette Ramos, councilwoman from the 14th district, Felicia Porter, councilwoman from the 10th district, Councilman Mark Conway from the 4th district. We are here for the sheriff's office. Sheriff Kogan, my apologies. Get stuck in traffic on Calvert Street, 1,352nd day in a row of utility work on the unit block of North Calvert Street. Mr. Sheriff, if you could please introduce each member of your senior team that's here with you to testify today, first and last name and position title, and then take your presentation away. Thank you.
Absolutely, and good morning to the council chair and to the council. Thanks for letting us present today. To my right, I have Assistant Sheriff Nicholas Blendy. Behind me, I have my Chief of Staff, Kevin Hayes, and off, raising his hand right now, would be Octavia Smith, our Chief Financial Officer. So I'm going to get going. I guess we'll start with our slide presentation for fiscal year 2024 and 2025. So the agency mission of the Sheriff's Office, one of the things we thought was important is to implement the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. In doing so, there's some pillars about building trust and legitimacy, looking at policy and oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime reduction, officer training and education, and officer safety and wellness. And as we go through the slide presentation, you'll see that our priorities are focused on this. To try to implement this type of strategy as a best practice. So some of the things that I want to highlight, and you're gonna hear me say this over and over again. The Sheriff's Office has transformed from what it was into something completely different. We used to be a 5-day-a-week, court-oriented organization that a lot of people didn't know about. One of our big pushes is to make sure everyone knows what we're doing, that we're out there 7 days a week, and that we're really in the community and visible. And so in doing so, we've developed some, from a community policing strategy, we're building collaborative relationships and developing services. So this year, I just want to highlight some things. One is that we're working with the health department and animal control to serve the civil warrants that they use to go in and seize animals that have been neglected, abused, or have bitten people. And if you'll see recently in the news, there was that 86 dogs that was seized. That was the Sheriff's Office participation and collaboration. Even yesterday, I think we seized 8 dogs from a house with them. How many was it? 13. 13 dogs from a house. One had a broken jaw, and the Sheriff's Office arrested the individual who was allegedly abusing those animals. So it's a very good partnership. And that's working well. We're working with the liquor board, doing joint task forces, looking at bars that are liquor stores that are supposed to have bars that are open and aren't open. So that's good. And we're also doing our underage enforcement. We have an illegally parked vehicle towing program. We acquired a tow truck as one of our functions. We marked it with lights, and we trained our deputy sheriffs on how to operate a tow truck with help of DOT. And we go around and we assist in doing traffic enforcement and removing illegally parked vehicles as a capacity of the Sheriff's Office and enhance that. Judicial threat investigations. I'm going to talk a little bit about this later on, but what we found is that with the way that the climate is in the country, judicial threats across the United States has gone up. And as a Sheriff's Office who protects the judiciary, we've had to step in and assist in those judicial threat investigations and take a leading role in that. Before that would go to the police department, which is running with the shortage and has some difficulties. And so we were using their resources, and now we've moved that internally. And while we work in partnership with them and our federal partners, we'll take the lead on almost all the judicial investigations that are occurring now. Special events assistance, you're gonna see a slide come up. The Sheriff's Office is everywhere in the entire city helping with special events in the community. And that's something that, one of the promises that we made that we would do when we got into office was to say that we're going to help the community out directly, and one of the ways we're doing that is to go into communities and staff their events and their public events, and also assist them that way by deploying deputies when the courts are closed and we have a surplus of personnel. and enhanced traffic enforcement. So the deputies were trained by the Maryland State Police and the Maryland Transportation Authority Police to utilize the LiDAR speed detection equipment and also in DWI enforcement. And you see the sheriff's office going out in response to the community. The community will request through our website that they're having a problem with speeding or a traffic issue, and we'll actually directly respond to that area. We'll survey the area through a traffic computer, looked at how many accidents were there. So for example, like at Northern Parkway and East Belvedere, we saw that there had been 52 injury accidents in that intersection, and including some fatal accidents. And we go out there and we do speed enforcement and traffic enforcement with the goal of trying to modify the driver behaviors and to make sure that people aren't speeding through there. And you'll see a slide about our activities that way. But these are the things that weren't done at the sheriff's office to the level that they're being done or weren't done at all, that are expanding our role and trying to make us more visible into the city so the city understands that there is a sheriff's office, that there is a sheriff here, and that the sheriff's office is here to help the city. So again, building trust and legitimacy, like we're working with all of our strategic partners in order to come out and do work. We're also looking at rewriting our entire general orders, which is our, and we have a program that's doing that, that's been funded, and the goal is to get certified, nationally certified, to be a national certified office with best practices due to our policies. And so we're working with our partners in doing that. So policy and oversight, some of the things that we're excited to talk about is that we have a detective unit right now, and we're able to detect rental fraud and do rental fraud investigations. So what we see on two fronts, we see one, we have squatters who are going in and they're occupying houses that they're not entitled to occupy, and sometimes terrorizing the neighbors in the neighborhood. And they're actually committing theft when they do that, and it's burglaries. We're able to detect that and do something about that, and people are calling our office and we're responding. We're also looking at landlords who are filing and saying they've done a lead inspection when they haven't done one, and say that they have a rental license when they don't have one. And that protects housing and making sure that people are safe in housing. The community traffic enforcement, I spoke on that. Community-centered policing techniques, that's just what we do. Our people are really focused on what the community is asking us to do and working community-centered. Innovative technologies in the eviction process. So we've, before I walked into office, there really wasn't computers. Right now, we've enhanced our technology, and we can track where our deputies are in real time. The deputies, when they're posting notices, we can geo-stamp the notice and take a picture of the notice, and it shows that they've actually served it. We're able to look at the houses that we're going to now and identify that there are warrants in the house when we're knocking on the door, where before we didn't know that. We're able to conceptualize where the evictions are occurring and send people not based on arbitrary districts, but actually where the work is occurring. So we have much more efficiencies. And so we're, again, innovating. We also have implemented email scheduling so that the landlords can schedule. We can also see where the landlords are scheduling, and we've digitized our eviction process. So all that has been incredibly helpful, and that's something that wasn't done before this year, ever, at the sheriff's office. Social media, so we're able to communicate with the public in a way that we weren't able to do so, and we're talking about some of the technology enhancements that we had. So we have, again, real-time reporting. So the deputies now, again, remember that they were using everything was paper. Now they're going out with a tablet. All the deputies have like a digital tablet. They're able to make their service returns right from the tablet, photograph what their work is, send it in. It's tracked in a central database, and that's incredibly more efficient when we're looking at things that we've done. We're also able now, and I'm sort of jumping ahead, but we have cars that are coming in that we've ordered that are on delivery, and we have some now that have printers in the car. And so the deputies, instead of having to go pick up the paperwork from the court, are going to be able to be emailed the paperwork into the car, print it out, and be able to serve it. And that's going to make us incredibly more efficient. And so we're happy about that. We have a backup communication system now. So I know that there was a council hearing when the radios went out at one time. The sheriff's office was able to use their cell phones and communicate on the radio with their cell phones because we had created a redundant system. And that's really enhanced our way that we can handle things. We have a digital address file now of wanted persons through the sheriff's office, and we're waiting to bring the police department warrants onto that, and that gives our deputies an awareness of when they're going out and they're serving summonses and they're in the street where these warrants are located. And again, I don't want to just read the slide, but I will say this, that we are so far ahead technology-wise of where we were when we began. We're really starting to see the benefits of that with efficiencies, and we're actually being used, and people are pointing to, especially with the technologies that were implemented, as a best practice around not only the state of Maryland, but around the country through some of the innovative technologies that we're doing as we're looking at efficiencies and how we're selecting our technology and how we're implementing it. Traffic enforcement, again, we've been doing traffic enforcement throughout the city and parking enforcement. We've had 2,360 total traffic and parking actions, which would be 343 traffic stops, 596 traffic citations issued, 1,132 parking tickets, and 289 warnings, right? And so this implementation of our traffic program, we know that we're getting high community feedback. It's the community who's requesting it through our website. I'm seeing speeding in my neighborhood at this intersection. Can the sheriff's office come out and do some traffic enforcement? And that's where a lot of this is being generated from. We're getting a very good response from the community, and people want to see the traffic enforcement. They're worried about what they would consider crazy driving, and it's good to see that the police department also agrees with us and has implemented their own traffic program. So it's good to work with them on that. These are the community details we have, and it's too much to read right now, but we keep track of everything that we do. We're making sure we're being equitable around the city and doing our details. We're making sure that we track what we're doing, and this is really, and I'm just going to go through, there's several pages of them, but we look at what we're doing, what these events, how they're around the city, how they're helping the city be more livable, how people are able to go out to these festivals and feel safe. I'm knocking on wood, but it's really the hard work of my deputies. We haven't had any incidents that I have to report to you during any of the deployments, what we've done. People are able to go to these festivals and events and be safe and enjoy the city of Baltimore, right? And it improves the livability of the city when we deploy like this. So these are, you guys can look at this later, but there's a lot of activity that we're doing on the weekends where the deputies are deploying in addition to the other duties that they're doing. Officer safety and wellness, again, we're stationed in the circuit court on the first floor. There's no locker room, there's no gym, there was no safety and wellness program when we started. And so what we were able to do is we were able to work with several places, and we found that Merit was the one we wanted to go to, and we created a gym membership for the deputies and civilian staff and a wellness coordinator, and we track whether people are going, and our people are going, and they're able to use a gym, and it's a benefit that they like. It also keeps them healthy, and it helps them maintain their physical fitness level that they need, and actually they're required to be tested on every year now as police officers. We also, the legislation in Annapolis was passed, I believe 2 years ago, implemented this year. Every one of our sworn employees has to go through a mental health evaluation, and we're on track to finish that for all covered employees. And we also implemented a physical training program for our cadets so that they're prepared for the law enforcement academy. And so we have 10 cadets right now in the Baltimore City Police Academy. When they went in, they were immediately able to pass the physical fitness, and they actually found that they were ahead of the other cadets that they were working with in their physical fitness because they had been involved for 4 months in a fitness program preparing them for that. So this is our organizational chart. I'll let you look at that at your leisure. So here's where we're funded. So the major budget items, Deputy Sheriff Enforcement. This service is responsible for serving all orders originating from the circuit court, like warrants, attachments, foreclosures, protective orders, levies, and this is the what we do. We would call this our field services division, and our warrant group comes out of this, and this is the bulk of our work as deputy sheriffs. To clarify, we have two forms of sworn employees. We have the deputy sheriffs that have citywide law enforcement authority, just like the police department has, and they also have the authority to take civil action, unlike the police department, and seize property. these are the deputy sheriffs. We also have court security officers, which is a different classification, and they're the bailiffs of the circuit court or the circuit court police department, and they're limited to their role in the circuit court. Service of protection and peace orders. This was a service that we took over from the police department in 2016, and we serve the protective orders and peace orders originating both from the circuit court and the district court. It's important to note that the district court service of peace orders is something that we have done voluntarily, and this is not something that we're required to do by law or by statute, that we've just taken this over. And so when we look at like all the things that the sheriff's office does, if we had to cut something because we didn't have the ability to staff, right, this would be the first one that would have to go, unfortunately, because this is a voluntary service where everything else we would consider a constitutional and a mandated duty. But we do a very good job here. We have people who are interviewing victims at the district court at North Avenue, getting their statements, which is a best practice. It's forwarded, the information is forwarded to the deputies, and they go out and they serve orders for interpersonal violence. So people who are suffering from domestic violence, interpersonal violence, can get the relief and safely leave the relationships that they are and be safe during that protection period. And it's very important that we serve these so people are able to get that relief. Because it's important to know, by the way, you don't get the relief of the order unless it's served upon you. So it requires a law enforcement officer to actually go out and serve it on somebody. Just the issuance of the order doesn't mean that the person's under protection. You have to find the individual to be served. It has to be served on them, and then that's why that service is so important, and we make sure we have a high service rate over there. District Court Sheriff Services and Child Support Enforcement, we merged the two because we found that the deputies were going to it didn't make sense for one deputy to go out for summons for one thing in one unit and another deputy to go out for service for something else. Yes.
Sir, camera, you're going to have to go over to the side. Anywhere on the side is fine. Thank you. Please continue.
No problem. Sure. So we merged the two sections for greater efficiencies, and this is what we talk about where we do our eviction work, our foreclosure work, our writs, our summonses and levy, all the civil process that's coming out, and this is where you see the sheriff being the enforcement arm of the circuit and district court. When they issue things, it's the sheriff's office that goes out and executes those orders to the standards of the community. Now, the child support enforcement, it's the same way. We're serving child support process, establishing paternity cases so families can get the benefits that they need. If the service isn't made, that's why we need to do a high service rate. It delays the process for people getting the support benefits that they deserve to receive. And also, we do enforcement here. If the court requires someone to be brought back in front of the court for contempt, it's the sheriff's office who goes out and arrests the people and brings them into the court in front of the judge through the child support enforcement services that we do. And that goes together with this funding. Courthouse security. So courthouse security is something that I'm going to pause right here and talk directly to the council about. And you have a letter that we submitted to the administrative office of the courts, and I know that the mayor's office has this letter. Through our assessment that we were doing anyway, we found after the judge had been killed in Washington County, right? There's really been a focus in the state on judicial security and courthouse security. And we were doing our own audit, and it's taken me, I would say, a budget cycle to really realize that we're incredibly underfunded when it comes to the court security that we're providing. And I get almost on a daily basis the administrative judge of the circuit court requesting services that we really aren't funded to provide. Not that we really aren't, that we aren't funded to provide. For example, the civil court has never historically had their own deputy sheriff or security, right? And we realize that that's not the way it should be. Every judge should have someone who's a deputy sheriff whenever they're holding court, even if it's a medical malpractice case or whatever. There should be some form of security in that courtroom, and that's for me to provide, and I'm telling you, we're not funded to do that. Judicial parking, where the judges are parked, we should be funded to protect them, right, in that area, and we are not, right? So if we look at what the judges are supposed to have and should have as a best practice, and we look at other jurisdictions, the Sheriff's Office in Baltimore City is not in this section funded to provide that kind of security. And so I can't say this in any other way, right? But to say that I'm imploring this body and also the Office of the Mayor to increase my budget for security so I can provide the services I'm being asked for. That is what the judges ask me every day, right? And I would be remiss in my position as sheriff if I didn't advocate as strenuously as I possibly can to say that we need to have more court security in the city, and that's going to require funding for that. And I've laid it out pretty clear in the letter that I've sent you, the history of it, where we are now, what would be required, and it talks in depth about how many judges there are, that there are 35 judges, or 34 judges, what the historic funding has been, how it's leveled out, and how and what role that does. As a result of not having the court security funding, what we do is we pull in deputy sheriffs who are a more expensive position that should be out in the field, and they're working as sort of like a stopgap measurement, and we're using overtime as well. So the courthouse is protected. I don't want to say it's not, but it's not protected to the level that the judiciary is requesting from me, right? We have to do things on overtime that we shouldn't do, and it's impacting negatively every other service that the sheriff's office can provide to the citizens of Baltimore. And so again, like, do you want to jump in on that at all? Yeah.
Thanks, Sheriff. Just to say that, you know, historically and typically around the state of Maryland, the local government does pick up the bulk of these services. Baltimore City does have a unique challenge in that its building is specifically old and not designed in a way to be efficient due to its age and historic nature. And it's something that the sheriff has brought up to the judiciary and has brought up to the governor, and hopefully will be participating on a state task force that is going to be started, I think, on July 1st, based on some legislation the General Assembly passed. So the funding challenges that the sheriff outlined in his bill are whatever they are, but it's, you know, the sheriff's here highlighting the problem because if you don't start talking about it, then those who have the power to help assist won't know about it. But yeah, we're not only, I don't think the sheriff's only asking the council. I think he's saying, you know, this is like an all options on the table, but the need is stark, and the letter speaks for itself.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, to the next slide. Again, court security. One of the things, again, when we're talking about court security challenges and what the sheriff's office has done that hasn't done before, previously we relied on the police department to enforce outside. So the sheriff's office said we have the inside of the court, police department, you have the outside of the court. We realized that when we have jurors walking into the footprint, you know, 500 or 600 jurors a day, when we have people parking all around the footprint of the courthouse, when we have the judges walking to and from the courthouse, all the staff walking to and from the courthouse, we can't take the posture that we're not responsible for what goes on outside of the courthouse and the courthouse facilities. So, you know, we're looking at doing this. You know, we have to patrol that area as well, just like you see college police patrolling the outside. So. Some things I also want to highlight. We're also, again, looking at grant funding. So these are some state grants we were able to grab for our warrant squad, some enhanced body armor and helmets and tactical supplies. We were able to get $42,000, computer equipment $44,000, locks and security cameras $15,000. Also, I talked about the tow truck, and you may have seen these Polarises and the updates in technology. All those were funded not through city taxpayer dollars, but through asset forfeiture that we get because we're on certain federal task forces. So those were bought not on taxpayer money, and we're doing everything that we can to try to stretch our budget out beyond what the city is putting up in the general fund. Again, this is funding the domestic violence unit. I just want to highlight, we also have a social worker program that's working on the eviction side. We're also looking at the social worker working on the interpersonal violence side because we're doing, again, victim interviews, and it would be good to steer them to available resources. All right, so obstacles to the sheriff's success. I talked about the court security. The other thing I feel obligated to talk about, and then we're going to continue to talk about until it's it's resolved is the pay disparity between the deputy sheriffs and the police department. They're making significantly less, although they have the same jurisdictional authority that the police department has, and that is causing retention and recruitment problems for me, and hopefully we can resolve that through the collective bargaining process. But until that is resolved, it's very, very problematic for the sheriff's office and for me to recruit people and also to retain people. And so I'm going to have to continue to beat that drum constantly, that my people deserve to be paid at least what the police department is being paid. Technology and body camera implementation. We've selected a body camera program. We're going through with that, and it's in purchasing right now, and I don't believe that we're funded for that in this budget. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure, Sheriff. Not certain. In the initial budget that we saw from the BBMR, I think there was a $500,000 allocation, and then our CFO couldn't identify it as it got to the final one. But this is a state mandate, and every law enforcement office in the state of Maryland is required to implement body-worn cameras by the end of the calendar year this year. So we're going to move forward with that in order to not be out of compliance, but I guess we just need to work with all parties to make sure that the funding has been included, and if we missed it, that's we're not necessarily experts on the moving money around within the city services.
And I can take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. We've also been joined by Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District member of the committee, Councilman Isaac Yitzi Schleifer, 5th District member of the committee. Colleagues, I'm going to ask that we limit ourselves to one question apiece for the sheriff so we can hopefully move through this quickly because we're a little bit behind schedule. Sheriff, you mentioned a need for increased security around the courthouse, specifically with respect to the judges. Do we have an estimate of what that annual cost is going to be?
Yes, it's in the letter, and I'll let
The letter that was shared estimate the first ballpark was about $7 million annually is what the underfunding is. And the sheriff can go into great detail about the unique nature about that. In Baltimore City, unlike other jurisdictions, the sheriff's office is responsible for courthouse security. It's in state law. And as time has gone on and the state has increased the number of judges that are required to be sitting in Baltimore City, which is up to 35 now, there has not been a commensurate inclusion of funding for. They put the money in for the judges, but they don't put the money in for the security. And every judge, as the sheriff said, needs protection. And so it's a thing that I think even when the sheriff realized this stark nature of what happened from 1973 to current, when the sheriff took over this function, I think it's just a thing that, you had a different sheriff for over 30 years, and that sheriff's priorities were whatever that administrator's priorities were. And this is the first time after this budget cycle, this full fiscal year that he's been in office, that he was really able to see just how, big the gap was.
Got it. Thank you. Member of the committee, Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sheriff Cogan, I know you talked about the security around the courthouse. I think at the last budget, out of all the law enforcement in the state of Maryland, you guys seem to be the lowest paid agency, but do the same work. So I'll be right here fighting to make sure your guys get a raise, because the only way you're gonna maintain them is they gotta get a raise kind of match what police departments surrounding jurisdictions have. So I think that should be a priority budget hearing also about how do we maintain our deputy sheriffs who do a great job, who help out with the police department, who helped out with communities. So I will be letting you know I'll be fighting to make sure we protect our judges, but we have to protect our deputy sheriffs so we can maintain them also. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I just also want to highlight, we also have the highest city resident law enforcement in the city. Over 50% of the deputies live in the city.
Committee member Schleifer. Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you permit me, not really my question, but just to clarify, what is the gap that you're trying to close for the court security?
Sure, Councilman. At the proposal that was sent, the initial proposal that was sent to the administrator office of the courts, the gap is about $7.2 million annually, and the thought that went into it, just to clarify, it would it would spend the money as efficiently as possible, because court security officers are less costly than deputy sheriffs. So as the sheriff pointed out in his comments, the fact that they're backfilling court security is an inefficiency and kind of not, from the sheriff's perspective, the best use, most efficient use of resources. And it was thought of, if there was the ability to, and the administration has started assisting, and I think they created 20 part-time court security office positions this budget cycle. But if you need 72 shifts filled per day in order to adequately protect the judges and the courthouse, you could fill those with a combination of full and part-time court security officers, and the part-time ones would often be retired sheriff's deputies or retired from other law enforcement. So the plan is thoughtful, and I know that we look forward to working with anyone who will, the council here today, the mayor's administration, the governor, and the judiciary, as we seek to right-size the gap here, because it is what it is.
Thank you for clarifying. And if the chair will permit me to ask my initial question, is that okay, Mr. Chair?
I'm going to come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Porter?
You mentioned that the deputy sheriffs have the same kind of duties as BPD sworn officers. Can you go through that a little bit? I want to make sure that I understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, sure. So the sheriff's office, the deputy sheriffs, not the court security officers, but the deputy sheriffs are peace officers. And so when they go out to do their civil enforcement work, and they are doing an eviction, for example, if the individual fails to comply with the civil order, the deputy sheriff is empowered to then arrest them for failing to comply with the civil order. And so in doing so, they inherently must have the same authorities as a law enforcement officer. And if you look at the public and local law that defines police, it doesn't say deputy sheriffs have the same authority as police. It says police have the same authority as deputy sheriffs.
Okay, so it's
yeah.
it's one directional, so it's not bi-directional, it's
Correct.
one directional. And so when we're talking about investigating homicides, when we're talking about all of that, that's a deputy sheriff cannot do that.
They could do that.
They could do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Ramos?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sheriff, I first want to thank you for immediately fulfilling your promises that you've made to basically this council and to the public about, the reforms to the office, and then, of course, particularly around eviction, and making sure that the law that was passed in the General Assembly a couple of years ago, where the landlord has to be licensed in order to evict, is actually being enforced. So I do appreciate that. You've also started to hire, and this is my question, could you go back and talk a little bit about the social workers?
Sure.
They have been, I think, very valuable to a lot of our residents, and I want to understand how many you have and how many you need.
Sure. So we need many more, right? I'm going to have to say that, right? But we have one right now who's developing the social worker program, and we're hiring. I believe we're allowed to hire 3. Is that the case? Yeah, 3 more, which we're actively looking for them right now. We're looking at resumes, and the purpose of this is we've identified that at the time of eviction, some of the people at that eviction are probably in crisis, right? And we need to identify what we can do after we've evicted them to help them. So it's not just, we're not doing like used to happen where you do an eviction every 15 minutes and send someone up the street. And there are plenty of services that the city has and private entities have that need to be connected, and someone needs to be able to connect that person. And so again, we talked about the deputies with the tablets. What the social worker is doing right now is if a deputy talks to someone who's been evicted and they see that they're in crisis, or they ask them, do you have a housing plan? And they say no, the social worker actually zooms right into the tablet or calls them, and they try to work that out in the field right then and there, so we can do something for them in the moment. I'd love to see that be expanded, and I'm going to let you talk about that for a second if you want.
Sure, and thanks, Sheriff. The other thing that's important is there was a piece of legislation that passed the General Assembly this session that was a priority of the governor, and the Renters' Bill of Rights. And the goal in that is to, reduce the amount of effort that is really spent collecting debts for landlords in a way that, as an industry, no other business gets law enforcement to collect your debts. And the theory behind it and what the sheriff testified in favor of is, it's the second largest unit within the sheriff's office is the amount of deputies that do evictions. And should they really be out there being used to collect a debt or do an eviction? So it's not as if this office is I think, coming in front of people with its hand out saying, give us more money. We're being proactive on every front to make sure that we can try and be as efficient as possible. And if we do see the fruits of that bill as intended, reducing the amount of papers that deputies have to serve, that's 5-10 deputies that can be reallocated to domestic violence orders or backfilling courthouse security, unfortunately, or any of the other things that the public, expects the sheriff to be able to do based on the promises that he made to them when running for seeking the office.
Thank you. Thanks very much for all that detail. Thank you.
Stokes. Schleifer. Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. Really happy to see the efforts that we're doing around traffic enforcement. I think it's really, really helpful to constituents that have been complaining about it for a long time. Also really happy to see BPD has followed that effort as well. I'm curious, how are we coordinating with BPD on those efforts so that, we're not duplicating or that those efforts actually work in concert with each other?
Right. So I have a good relationship with the commissioner, right? We speak. We could do a better job, and you're highlighting something in communicating. I want to explain how our program works. Our program works is like a community member literally doesn't like what they see in their neighborhood and contacts us directly, and we respond directly to that community member. And so every one of them has an after-action report. It talks about, we look at, make sure there's no racial profiling, what kind of stops we made. And so we have those after-action reports. And, you're just clicking something in my brain that we probably should share that at a greater level. And so I appreciate that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Porter.
Another quick question, just to follow up on that. When 911 is called, can the sheriff's office kind of deploy in the same manner as BPD? I'm trying to make sure that I understand the similarities and or contrast between the positions.
Sure. So the police department is staffed to answer 911. We're not, right? However, we have the same radios as the police. And so we have at times, right, deployed in an area and picked up some 911 call responses. Or when we're in the area and we hear a response, we can respond. And if police call for backup, the sheriff's office responds to that as well. Also, we have one of the technology things we did is that we're geofencing certain areas like the courthouse. And if the 911 call goes out, we're also being notified so we can immediately respond.
Okay.
So the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, and so what percentage, and I'm trying to phrase my question correctly, what percentage of those 911 calls do you all get from the sheriff's office that you respond to? So if you all are deployed, what's the percentage? Is it 10%? Is it 15, 20%?
So let me so we don't go answer 911 calls. That's not what we do.
Okay.
But
if you hear it.
But we have, right?
Yes.
So for example, we've done joint patrol initiatives with the police department,
Sure.
and our deputies switch over to their channels,
Sure.
right? And we would answer a call, right? So during an event. We've done that, and we have done that, and we have the capacity to do that.
Sure.
But I don't want to confuse the citizens. Like, if someone dials 911, the police are going to show up.
Okay.
Right? Unless they call for the courthouse area,
For the
and then we
courthouse.
get notified. Right?
Okay, perfect. And so, just so that I have an understanding, is that ad hoc? Is that 10? Is that 15%? Have you been able to quantify when you all have been able to kind of collaborate or co-answer 911 calls?
No, but what I can give you is that the deployment and patrol hours that we have in
Yes.
areas,
Yes.
right? And we could probably look at the crime rates that were in that area.
Mm-hmm.
When we were in that area, we do look at that. We look at if we deploy, were there any calls for service did people even dial 911 while we're in that area? We do look at that.
Yes.
And we find that drops dramatically or is reduced to zero when we're deploying in some of these areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair, are we allowed a second question?
No.
Okay.
Ramos. Anyone else? Porter? Conway?
I did have another question. Thank you. I had a question related to a follow-up to Councilman Conway's question about the interagency, just about like service requests. Do you all do any type of like community engagement? So the police department, they submit 311s, they do kind of the community engagement, neighborhood policing model. Do you all implement that within your program?
Not like they do, right? Because we're not geared like that. We do directly interact with the community, though. We go to community association meetings. We have, we reach out and do community engagement, and we publish our stats, right?
Okay.
So
What types of calls do you all receive within the department from that neighborhood policing model?
I can forward some of the things that we get from them.
Okay.
But we're getting things through our web portal as we're reaching out. One of the things that, like I said, when I began, is there was no community engagement like that. And so there wasn't a way for the community to even interact with us. Now there's a web portal where they can go in and do that. People call us a lot. People walk into us a lot. And people, again, the deputies, a lot of them live in the city, and people talk to them directly because they're in the communities.
Okay. I wonder if for the next budget cycle, since you all kind of received that input, I wonder if performance metrics can be added or at least refined a little bit more, because one of the things that I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
Sure.
I find it interesting, the similarities. I didn't know that. And so that's why I'm trying to get in my brain what those similarities are, but versus the contrast of it.
Right. So just look at it like we're doing a lot of the court enforcement work. So like we're going out on warrants, we're going out on eviction orders, we're going out on foreclosures, we're serving things. While we're out there, we have the full police authorities. And then we're also engaging in patrol services and law enforcement services during events and festivals in the community where we're acting in that manner.
Colleagues, any other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Stokes?
Sheriff Cogan, I know there's a shortage of police in the police department. I might have got here late. How many vacancies do you have actually, and how are you recruiting to kind of decrease it actually?
Yeah, we'll get you the exact numbers of vacancies. I know it's significant. And the way that we can reduce that is increase the salary. That's really what it is. We're doing everything at my level to try to make morale and working conditions better, and do health and wellness and try to, we can't really do much about working conditions being in the courthouse and not having our own building, which is problematic in and of itself. But really, it's the disparity in pay right now that's crippling us in our recruitment and retention efforts.
And there's 103 deputy sheriff positions that exist in state law that are required to be funded. And I think last time we snapshotted, it was somewhere in the 20s how many vacancies there were. 26.
So, Mr. Chair, that is a request. I didn't follow orders that time, but. And my other question is, before you leave, Sheriff, and I've said this before the council, how is the Baltimore City Sheriff Department? How is the Baltimore City Police Department? And how is our law enforcement working together to address the crime in the city? I mean, we can sit here and talk about we're meeting, but is any report that y'all sent out to the council, to the community, that you know what y'all doing and working together? Because I think that's important that people in the city that not just hear it, but have some documentation to show how y'all sitting in the same room, coming up with some strategy of how we address crime here in the city.
I agree with you.
Colleagues, any other questions? Sheriff, want to thank you and your team for the outstanding service to the city. Appreciate it. We're now in recess. We will pick back up in about 2 minutes with State's Attorney.